The year was the late 20th century, an era when humanity had begun to stretch its reach beyond the Earth and into the uncharted seas of space. Captain Neil Patterson sat at the controls of his sleek rocket ship, a man whose calm voice and steady hands gave confidence to his crew. With him were Lieutenant Larry Turner, ever quick with a joke to ease the tension, Lieutenant Mike Cruz, the loyal and steady-hearted pilot, and Professor Conrad, the wise scientist who carried with him the knowledge of Earth's brightest minds. Their mission was simple, or so they believed: to journey to a newly constructed space station, rendezvous with its staff, and test advanced equipment meant to expand Earth's future among the stars. The ship glided effortlessly against the backdrop of infinite darkness, the stars like scattered jewels around them. Inside, the men exchanged banter, their words light, as though space travel had already become routine. Yet beneath their confidence lay the unspoken truth: they were explorers of the unknown, their path filled with risks no one could truly measure. As the ship neared the orbit where the great space station should have loomed, all four men pressed close to the viewing screens. But what they saw was not the gleaming wheel of human achievement they expected. Instead, they witnessed a blinding flash of light, a lance of fiery energy cutting through the heavens. In stunned silence, they watched the space station disintegrate, its massive structure torn apart and reduced to burning fragments. The vision lasted only seconds, but its impact left the crew shaken to their core. "Good Lord, it's gone," Professor Conrad whispered, his face pale. Before anyone could react further, the same mysterious energy beam streaked across the void again. This time, it struck their ship. A violent shudder ripped through the vessel as alarms blared and panels sparked. The men were thrown against their harnesses, gripping whatever they could as the rocket spun out of control. The black emptiness of space became a dizzying whirl beyond the windows. Captain Neil wrestled with the controls, his jaw set in grim determination, but the beam's force was relentless. "She's not responding," he shouted over the chaos. "We're being pulled off course." The ship plunged forward as though seized by an unseen hand, dragged across the cosmos at a speed they could hardly comprehend. Instruments went wild, and the professor muttered desperate calculations, trying to determine their trajectory, but even his brilliance could not predict where they were heading. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shaking ceased. A strange calm fell over the ship, though the crew's hearts pounded with fear. Outside the windows stretched the curved horizon of a world they had never seen before: blue skies, green forests, glittering rivers, all beneath a golden light that was not Earth's sun. The rocket hurtled downward, its engine sputtering, its metal frame groaning against the pressure of re-entry. "Brace for impact," Captain Neil commanded. Moments later, the ship tore through alien clouds and struck the ground with a thunderous crash, skidding across strange soil before coming to rest in a smoking crater. The men sat in stunned silence, alive but shaken. Slowly, one by one, they unfastened their belts and stared through the cracked viewport. What they saw was a paradise unlike any they had imagined, a lush and vibrant world that seemed both familiar and strange. They had survived, but they were no longer on Earth. Friends, if this story touches your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more heartfelt tales. The smoke still curled from the battered hull of the rocket as the crew climbed out, one by one, onto alien soil. The air was surprisingly breathable, warm with a faint fragrance of blossoms that reminded them of spring on Earth. Around them stretched a paradise of towering trees with silver leaves, flowers of impossible colors, and skies that glowed in golden light. Despite their exhaustion, the men felt the awe of explorers who had stumbled upon Eden itself. But wonder quickly gave way to unease. A sudden rustle came from the jungle that bordered the clearing. Captain Neil motioned for silence, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm holstered at his belt. The sound grew louder, soft footsteps, deliberate, too organized to belong to mere animals. Then, from the shadows, figures emerged. At first, the men thought their eyes deceived them, but as the figures stepped closer, their astonishment only grew. They were women, dozens of them. Tall, poised, and clad in flowing, colorful garments that shimmered in the sunlight, they moved with precision, their hands gripping sleek, futuristic weapons. Their faces, though beautiful, were stern and unyielding. The astronauts exchanged bewildered glances. "All women," Mike muttered under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me." The leader of the group, a striking woman with dark eyes and regal bearing, raised her weapon. "You are trespassers on the planet Venus," she declared in a commanding tone. Her words carried an accent, but her meaning was unmistakable. "Surrender your arms, or face death." Realizing they were outnumbered, Neil lifted his hand slowly, signaling to his crew to do the same. The women advanced with practiced efficiency, binding the astronauts, hands with metallic cords that tightened at the slightest movement. There was no hostility in their eyes, only a cold discipline. The march to the palace began. Guided by their captors, the men moved through paths that cut across a breathtaking landscape, crystal rivers, flowering fields, and distant towers that rose against the horizon. The air was alive with strange bird-like creatures, yet the silence of the women's escort made the journey tense. Finally, they reached the city. What rose before them was both majestic and alien: domed structures of gleaming stone, archways carved with symbols, and courtyards filled with marble statues of women. It was a civilization of elegance and artistry, yet no men were anywhere to be seen. They were led into a vast palace hall lined with columns and golden drapes. At the far end, upon a high throne, sat the ruler herself, Queen Ilana. She wore an elaborate gown of crimson and gold, and over her face, a gleaming mask that hid her features completely. Only her eyes, sharp and burning with disdain, were visible. So, her voice rang out, cold and commanding, "Men have come again to Venus." She rose slowly, her presence filling the hall with an aura of authority. "You are not welcome here. Men brought only war and destruction to my world. Now, you will remain my prisoners, and your Earth will be next." The astronauts stood in stunned silence, realizing the peril they had stumbled into. Not only were they trapped on an alien planet, they were now at the mercy of a queen who hated everything they represented. The astronauts were confined to a lavish yet heavily guarded chamber within the palace. Though the walls were adorned with silken drapes and gold-etched carvings, the men felt no comfort in their gilded prison. Outside the barred windows stretched the city of Venus, its elegant towers gleaming beneath a golden sun, but within, tension weighed heavily on them. Larry paced the floor in agitation, muttering about escape. Mike tried to lighten the mood with half-hearted jokes, though his voice trembled with unease. Professor Conrad sat, quietly, studying the alien inscriptions etched into the walls, while Captain Neil leaned against the window, his mind racing. They had to find a way to reach Earth, or at least prevent the Queen's threat from becoming reality. The door creaked open, and the men stiffened. But instead of guards, a woman entered. She was radiant, her blonde hair flowing over her shoulders, her gown shimmering like liquid silver. Unlike the cold, unyielding warriors who had captured them, her face carried warmth and intelligence. She regarded them with cautious eyes, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "I am Talia," she said softly, her voice touched with an accent yet melodic and kind. "Do not be afraid, I am not your enemy." Neil stepped forward warily. "Then why are you here?" She glanced at the door, lowering her voice. "Because the Queen must not hear of this. You are strangers, yes, but perhaps you are also the answer we have waited for." Her words carried a weight of hidden rebellion. She explained that many women of Venus were weary of Queen Ilana's cruelty. The Queen's mask, she revealed, concealed not only physical scars from the war but also a soul consumed by bitterness. Men, once companions and equals on Venus, had been banished or destroyed because Ilana could not forgive what she believed they had caused. "But not all of us share her hatred," Talia said firmly. "We remember a different time, when Venus thrived, when men and women built together, dreamed together. The Queen seeks only vengeance, but we long for harmony again." Professor Conrad leaned forward, his eyes lighting with interest. "Then you oppose her?" Talia nodded. "Yes, quietly, secretly, many of us do, but her guards are loyal, and her power absolute. Alone, we cannot stop her. Yet with your help," she let the words trail off, her gaze settling on Captain Neil. The men exchanged glances, their hopelessness flickering into cautious hope. For the first time since their crash, an ally had appeared, a woman brave enough to defy her queen. "Help us," Talia pleaded, her voice urgent now. "Together, perhaps we can save not only Venus, but also your Earth." In that moment, Captain Neil knew their mission had changed. They were no longer mere explorers lost in space. They had become part of a rebellion that could alter the fate of two worlds. The palace trembled with the deep hum of energy as the Queen's weapon, the Beta Disintegrator, prepared to unleash its fury. From within a towering chamber of polished steel and glowing crystals, arcs of light coursed through conduits, converging toward the enormous cannon that pointed skyward like the finger of doom. Queen Ilana stood at its controls, her crimson robes flowing, her golden mask gleaming under the light of the machine. Around her, loyal guards stood at attention, their faces cold and loyal to the end. From their hidden vantage point in the shadow of the corridors, Captain Neil and his crew watched with grim determination. Talia was with them, her eyes burning with resolve. She had led them through secret passageways to the very heart of the palace, risking everything to give them this chance. The plan was simple, yet perilous. They had to sabotage the weapon before Ilana fired it at Earth. The moment she activates it, Professor Conrad whispered, millions will perish. That beam could shatter continents. Neil tightened his grip on his sidearm. Then we stop her here. Tonight. They crept forward, but their presence did not remain hidden for long. A guard spotted them, her sharp cry ringing through the chamber. At once, blasters were raised, and the silence shattered into chaos. Beams of searing light cut through the air as the men dove behind pillars. Neil returned fire, stunning one of the guards, while Larry and Mike struggled against two others in hand-to-hand combat. Talia darted toward the main console, her nimble fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. Sparks erupted as she twisted a lever free and ripped a panel loose. The Queen turned sharply, her voice a venomous hiss. Traitor! Ilana advanced, her eyes blazing with hatred. I gave you everything, and you betray me for these men. Talia stood her ground, her voice steady. You gave us nothing but fear. It ends tonight. With a scream of rage, Ilana lunged for the controls. The machine roared to life, energy surging to its peak. The room shook violently, glass shattering, panels sparking. Professor Conrad shouted over the chaos, it's unstable. If she fires now, the whole thing will overload. Neil and Ilana clashed in a desperate struggle near the control console. Her strength, fueled by madness, was fierce, but Neil wrestled her back. Suddenly, her mask was torn free, revealing her scarred face beneath. The sight was haunting, skin twisted by burns, eyes hardened by years of hatred. You see, she cried, this is what men gave me. Fire, war, destruction. But her words were drowned out by the roar of the weapon as it reached critical power. Sparks rained down from above, and the machine's core pulsed like a beating heart about to explode. Everyone down, Neil shouted. In the next instant, the beta disintegrator imploded in a blinding flash. The blast consumed Ilana, her final scream echoing through the chamber as fire and light swallowed her throne of power. The shockwave hurled the rebels and astronauts to the ground, but when the dust cleared, the weapon was gone, reduced to rubble and smoldering debris. Breathless, Talia rose to her feet, her eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. The tyrant was dead, the weapon destroyed. Venus was free, but freedom had come at a terrible cost. The palace lay in ruins, smoke rising from shattered walls, yet for the first time in years, the air of Venus felt light, unburdened. The echo of the Queen's final scream still lingered, but with her gone, the oppressive shadow she had cast over the planet lifted like a storm finally broken. The astronauts and Talia stood among the debris of the disintegrator chamber, their bodies bruised, their clothes scorched, but their spirits unbroken. Around them, women who had once been Ilana's soldiers lowered their weapons. Their eyes, once cold with fear or loyalty, now softened with relief. They were free from the tyranny that had bound them for so long. Talia stepped forward, her posture regal despite the dust that clung to her gown. The women looked to her instinctively, as if sensing the leader she was destined to become. Captain Neil, still catching his breath, turned to her. Venus needs someone to guide it now. Someone who believes in more than hate. Talia's gaze swept over the faces of her sisters, then to the men who had risked everything to help them. Her voice rang clear, steady, and hopeful. No longer will Venus be ruled by fear. We will rebuild, not in isolation, but in harmony. One day, men and women will walk side by side on this planet again. And when that day comes, Venus will shine brighter than ever. A murmur of agreement rose among the women, then cheers, soft at first, but growing until the palace chamber echoed with voices filled with joy. For the first time in years, hope had returned to Venus. As the celebration swelled, Neil caught Talia's eye. For a moment, the chaos around them faded, and they stood in a quiet understanding. She smiled, a soft, radiant expression that held both gratitude and something unspoken. Neil returned the smile, though duty reminded him that soon he and his crew would have to leave. Later, as dawn bathed the alien horizon in golden light, the astronauts prepared their damaged rocket for departure. The women of Venus gathered to see them off, their faces filled with admiration for the strangers who had changed their destiny. Talia approached Neil one last time, laying her hand gently on his arm. Go with peace, she said warmly, and know that Venus will always remember you. With that, The rocket lifted skyward, rising into the endless heavens. The men watched the shrinking world below, carrying with them not just the memory of survival, but the promise of friendship between two distant worlds. For Venus, it was a new beginning. For Earth, it was a future bound to the stars. If this story moved you, please share it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories of love, redemption, and hope.